Hey man, what's up?
What? I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to go camping or glamping this weekend, so I'm kind of getting some stuff together.
Well, are you going to take that percolator?
Well, yeah,
Of course. So definitely glamping.
yeah. Hey guys, welcome to Gear Tasting. Today I'm going to start off talking about a new pack I just received from Arc'teryx. So this is their new Assault 30 pack, which you may think looks suspiciously like the old Khard pack, and you're right. They've changed the name a little bit and added some new features and upgrades on the Assault 30, which I'm going to talk through today and kind of compare and contrast the two packs. I've been using a Khard pack almost since they came out. Stay. Okay, almost since they came out, and I really love the pack idea and the design behind it. I've used it quite extensively on a couple of outings to the great outdoors, and I've really enjoyed kind of the functionality and storage capacity that it has and things like that. And it's deceptively small in terms of, you know, a pack that you would pack, you know, for a multi-day adventure or something like that. But it actually has quite a bit of room in the pockets that aren't really visible. So it does a really good job of hiding space, I guess, in a way. So the main function of the Khard pack when it came out was that it, you know, had this big kind of clamshell opening design. And within this, I like to route the waist strap around here so I don't have to take it off. And it makes it easy to kind of get together like this. But when you open it all the way, you can almost completely clamshell or fillet it open like this, and you've really got a pretty large area to work in. And I do like the idea that these, basically I guess you would call these the load bearing straps. You would tighten these to decrease the footprint. The name's escaping me, I apologize. But these actually do a really good job of preventing that flap from flying all the way open on you when you don't want it to. So the inside is lined with loop Velcro on both interior sides as well as kind of an area in the back. And then it is an internal frame pack, so these little Velcro strips here contain the stays. And the stays are curved, just like this, so there's a good contour on your back with the pack too. I really think it's a very comfortable pack to wear. But one of my kind of complaints with these stays is that I've noticed that you really need to make sure that this webbing strap on the Khard is behind this other piece of webbing, because what happens to the stays is they kind of wind up working their way out like this, and I've had that happen before. It's not that the stay would come out, but it's just, I guess it's kind of annoying when, you know, the stay kind of jumped to the side, which they have fixed in the Assault 30, and I'll show you that. So the other part of the Khard, you know, like I said, it has this waist strap, which was all webbing material. And then the shoulder pads are somewhat padded, but they're very contoured, and I like the way it fits. And you can kind of see from the side profile here, hopefully, that contour that kind of fits your back really nicely. So those are the main features of that. And then the outside pockets here have pretty large storage areas. And there's actually a routing system right here that comes through those, so that if you want to put a hydration bladder in either one of these outside pockets, you can do so. And then, you know, you can also grab the pack from the side too. So meaning if you were wearing it over a shoulder, just like so, you can kind of spin it around like this while you're wearing it, you know, and get into those pockets like that. Or you can actually, if I find the zippers here, you can actually open it like this and get into the pack this way, kind of sideways almost. You know, you can also adjust the zipper around like this, so you're literally just opening the flap on the outside to get into the pack this way too. So I do like the functionality of the Khard and now the Assault 32. Some of the upgrades they have made on it is that now The shoulder pads are a lot more padded, so you can kind of see the profile of where the shoulder strap used to run. So if you compare the shoulder straps on these, you can kind of see the difference between that. And now there's kind of this large padded area behind there, which is, I think going to add a lot more comfort to the pack if you have it loaded down. I do believe that this isn't really designed for a huge, super heavy load. I do like the fact that it's got a waist strap and a sternum strap, if you need to secure a heavier load to you. Obviously you want that riding on your hips and you want the weight there rather than on your shoulders. That's kind of any backpack system. But I like that it's got that and it allows for that. So along those lines, they've also added, I kind of jacked this pack all up. Along those lines, I mentioned it's got just a webbing-based waist belt, and now they've added basically a padding system that's contoured for your hips on each side. So you can see here, they've got those padding pieces on each side. But you can actually still remove those if you want to. You can undo the webbing from the male and female sides of the 2-inch buckle here, and you can pull that 2-inch webbing through that, just like this. And basically just remove those if you want. So this tri-glide here is actually acting as a lock to keep the waist belt in and on the removable pad itself. So that's an upgrade they made to the pack. They also changed the dimension of the interior pocket on the top lid. So if you'll see here, which I had this kind of gripe too a little bit too, but the top lid pocket comes all the way down below the Arc'teryx logo, so my fingers are hitting right here, whereas now it comes just to the top of that logo. So they did decrease the actual size in here because it was easy to lose stuff in that pocket, and I found myself doing that, so I was kind of glad when I kind of heard that. And they've also taken the top zipper access part too and added this kind of weather flap on it, so that water isn't going to get into that zipper as easily. It is a reverse zipper, so inherently it's going to let less water in, so to speak, than a normal regular sided zipper would. And what I mean by that is kind of trying to describe the difference between a reverse zipper and a regular zipper here. This is probably the best way to describe it. That's a regular zipper, just like this, so you can see the teeth. And a reverse zipper is like this. It's basically just the back side of the zipper tape that's run a different way when it's in manufacturing. It requires a different slider though if you're going to use reverse zippers though, so a little bit more information you probably want to know. Anyway, so that pocket's been modified, and then if you open it up and you look in the inside of the Assault 30, let me fillet this one open just like before. So you can see the inside is relatively unchanged in terms of what you've got as far as loop goes. You've got a little bit more that extends all the way down to the bottom here on the inside now, but these stays have now been kind of upgraded a little bit. I don't know what they changed about it. It looks like they kind of went with different webbing on the stay part right here on the cover or the flap for it, so that it actually protects it more, and there's no chance it's going to come out anymore, so you won't have that problem. So I'm super excited that they fixed that too. So, and then in the back of the pack, I didn't mention this, but if you want to run a bladder on the inside, it does have a pass-through back here too. So if you were going to run that on the inside of this, maybe in a Velcro-backed pouch or something for a bladder, you could do that as well. Velocity Systems now makes pouches designed specifically for Khard packs or the Assault 30, and these do come in different sizes too. This is just I think this is the Khard 30 is what they called this size. I don't know if that's actually on the pack anywhere. I thought it might have been, but could be mistaken too. Well, I believe this is the Khard 30, that's why this is the Assault 30. It's basically a 30-liter pack in size. So those are just some quick features I wanted to go over as far as the differences now on the packs. So check it out. I'll post a link down below if you want to look at the packs and compare the costs and things like that. So that is the Arc'teryx Assault 30. Welcome to Questions Over Coffee. The first question today comes from Johnny Utah maybe, from YouTube, who asked about the HSP magazine inserts we had spoken about on a previous episode. Says, how well do the magazine pouch inserts work with other chest rigs such as the Mayflower UW Gen 4? I actually have a Gen 4 here that I'm going to talk about and how that works with it. So the premise behind these, if just as a quick recap from the other video, is that the magazine kind of sandwiches between these and it provides a way to kind of securely lock in the magazine in pouches that don't already have some type of retention. So for instance, on this Mayflower rig, you've got this shock cord retention pull tab device that kind of sits on top of the magazine to prevent it from going anywhere. But the premise behind these is that you don't need that, and you can run this and it kind of sandwiches and holds pressure on the magazine so it doesn't fall out. So the way that looks in the Haley rig that we talked about is that it has a nice seating in there and it kind of locks it in, so there's no way it's going to fall out or anything like that. And even with a loaded mag, that's not going to happen. So the way this interfaces and kind of prevents the whole insert from coming out when you pull the mag is that it's got this little U-shaped cutout on the back, and that interfaces with the webbing strip that runs across the back of this Haley strategic rig, and it kind of works its way in there and holds a little bit to kind of prevent that whole thing from coming out. So the question as to whether this works on the Gen 4, it actually does work on these, and it works in a different way. So the U-shaped cutout, so the tabs themselves are what lock it in on the Haley rig. The U-shaped cutout is actually what helps keep it locked in on the Mayflower rig. So when you put this into there, I'll try to show you up close here, but there's a webbing, a small 3/4 inch webbing tab here that kind of comes up from the from the rear, and actually helps lock that in. So when I put the magazine in and lock it in, that's not coming out. So it doesn't remove the actual insert, and that's really the conundrum. Does it remove the insert when you pull on the mag? And it doesn't. So it does help keep it locked in, and I almost am willing to kind of say more so than the Haley rig itself, because of that, the way that webbing piece is, it really prevents it from moving around much at all. Whereas it's just such a small amount of webbing that is caught by the Haley rig. If you can kind of see that, I mean, even when you're just kind of moving the rig around, it already jumped out of that webbing. So I would say it definitely works, and hope that answers your question. Okay, next question comes from Howard S. on Twitter. Going to Costa Rica next spring, looking for a quality, tactical, lightweight raincoat to add to my EDC. Thoughts? Yes, you're probably not going to like my thought because it's an expensive thought, but you said quality, so I'm going to talk about Arc'teryx again. I very much recommend the Alpha LT jacket from Arc'teryx. Leaf makes the Alpha LT, so their law enforcement and military line, which is available to civilians, so don't let the name fool you. You can pick this up from a bunch of different retailers. I'll have a link below in the description where we recommend to pick it up at. But I like it because LT means lightweight, so it is a very super lightweight jacket. I also like it because it's got chest pockets here that are great for storing things in, as well as vent like pit zips. So if you're in an area where you're actually moving around and sweating underneath the Alpha LT, you can vent the jacket really easily. So that's something that happened a lot on the Mammoth Sniper Challenge I was just in. This is what I ran as an outer shell when I was there. So what would happen is, I mean, we were down to like -2 degrees. Obviously, I had insulative layers on underneath, and I talked pretty extensively on that in a past episode, so I won't necessarily get into that too much. But it was great because I started out in a lighter weight underlayer, and I layered this on top of that. So the Alpha LT was my over jacket, and I have this in a Crocodile as an older version. That's really the one I wore during it. But same concept with this. Is actually newer Gore-Tex technology, and it's actually a better jacket. So every time they come out with a new one, they're constantly upgrading fabric and technology behind these jackets, and would highly recommend this. So I'm going to kind of compare it to a different option too, but on the inside of this is really what you want to look for on a good raincoat, is all the interior seams. Even if you don't go with this Arc'teryx one, really look at that as an option. All the seams are sealed, and they're not only sealed, they're really well sealed too. So I've seen some crappy sealed seams, and I will show you that, because it's very interesting when you look at what a crappy seam is sealed like. So this is an old school PCU jacket. It's a first gen PCU system, and you can see what a crappy seam, sealed seam this is. And I'm sure when it started out it was good, but you know, over the years it started peeling, and I wouldn't trust this jacket in a downpour now because of the fact that these seams have all this basically air pockets showing in them. So I wouldn't really trust this to be completely waterproof. I think after a while it would probably soak through or permeate the jacket. So you really want to look for something that's quality made, and you're going to get what you pay for even when it comes to a rain jacket like you're talking about. But I mean, this thing can pack down pretty small. I would be willing to bet you could probably get it down to something like a Nalgene in size. You might even be able to fit it inside a Nalgene if you were so inclined, but it'd be hard getting it out of there. So again, Alpha LT, seams are sealed. It's got an interior pocket here, which I like. I've used that before. But again, really good construction. And then, you know, kind of the other option that I want to kind of steer you away from is using something like a wind shirt. A wind shirt, even though it's going to cut down on wind like it's designed to do, it's not going to protect you from water. So Rob made a good point that this is kind of like a tent. So if you've ever been in a tent that's not seam sealed, it's like that fabric on a tent. It may be waterproof and keep the water out, but whenever you touch the tent, it's going to allow that water to bleed through. And that's kind of what this material would do in a downpour. So, you know, it might protect you for a little bit from just a light rain, but you know, in a downpour, it's definitely going to permeate the material and leave you soaked. So I would definitely go with a good rain shell. I recommend the Arc'teryx Alpha LT. There's plenty of them out there. I'm not saying this is the only one, but I have really prolonged experience with these, and I would highly recommend them in any situation. Okay, next question for Questions Over Coffee comes from Joe Durobot on YouTube, which is actually a coffee-related question. I have a question for you on your next Questions Over Coffee. That's actually about coffee. Sorry, I jumped the gun a little bit on that. It's about making coffee in the field, like how to make coffee from MREs. What options are there to make coffee on the go? So, I'd like to talk about a couple of different options that I've used before and how those work kind of in a field environment, if you will, or outside when camping. So, bottom of the barrel, quickest way, in the MREs, there's an instant package. So really, all there is with that is boiling water and dumping the coffee into that. Anytime you boil water and you're making coffee and you really care about the quality of your coffee, I would suggest not dumping the immediately boiling water on top of your grounds. Wait about 10 or 15 seconds before you actually do that. And that goes for any of these methods, except for the percolator. It's a little different. So aside from that, I guess the upgrade to the MRE coffee is probably like a Starbucks Via packet. I've actually used those. I took a bunch of those on the Mammoth thing when I was just camping a couple weeks ago. That's why it's fresh in my mind. I'm not really a fan of Starbucks coffee, but it is a good way to kind of have that in the field. And I didn't even use those. I mean, honestly, as much as I love coffee and I drink coffee multiple times a day, I just dealt with the coffee headache from the caffeine, the lack of caffeine, because I just didn't have the time to sit down and make a cup of coffee in the morning. It just wasn't that kind of schedule. But if you have the time, it really depends on how elaborate of a setup you have. Are you glamping? Are you camping? Are you backpacking where you have to move and you're on the go a lot? So kind of the upgrade from the Starbucks Via is probably something like a jet boil. So they make the little insert that you screw together like this. This is their coffee press. So what you would do is basically take your boiling water, wait 10 or 15 seconds, then dump your coffee grounds into that, and then use this press to actually press that down over a period of time, and you would basically cause that brewed coffee to rise, and that's what you would dump into a coffee cup or something like that. I guess you could keep that in there and just kind of drink it out of the jet boil if that was your only option. You'd probably get a few little grounds in there though. But one thing I wanted to point out is the screen, or the mesh screen that's on this jet boil coffee press, is pretty fine. So you could use probably your coffee grounds that you might already have that are, I don't know, like a finer grind. So meaning that if you're using kind of a I guess like a pour over coffee or something in a coffee machine, That's typically a coarser ground, and that's something you would need for the percolator, which I'll talk about in a second. But for something like this, you would probably be able to get away with having a coarser ground, a finer ground on the jet boil. So then the next kind of step up, if you're definitely glamping, is kind of putting one of these percolators over a stove. And we do that every time I camped with my son's Boy Scout troop. This is what we always have going. Typically we have a larger percolator because there's usually, 8 to 10 adults drinking coffee in the morning, and sometimes kids want some too. And we wind up having to make multiple pots of this. So some tips for using a percolator, and there are some do's and don'ts for a percolator, which I can talk about. So the way that this works is that you put water in here up to a magical fill line on the inside. So this says 9 cups. That's about the max of where you would want to fill that to. And then you put your grounds inside this basket. So the basket has a little kind of metal gasket there, and the basket sits on that, so it's not going to get pressed down any lower than that. Then this basket goes on top of that, just like so, and that's where your grounds sit. So what happens is, as the water starts boiling, it gets pushed through the bottom of this tube, and it kind of spurts out the top here and dumps into the basket and falls down. So basically the water is hitting the grounds and falling through and giving you the actual made coffee that's on the inside. So what happens is, if this was together like this, over time this would boil, and this is a little clear window that's up on top that allows you to see the coffee spurting out. And if you let this go too long, what happens is the coffee actually the grounds start to actually fall into the coffee, and it gets, it's more like cowboy coffee after a while if you let it sit. So you got a lot of grounds in the coffee. And then you just basically, grab this like this, grab the little D-ring here, and you'd pour the coffee into your cup. So that's kind of the percolator. So what I recommend with this is you have to make sure, one, that your grounds are large enough to not fall through basically the top lid, because that's what happens. It's not necessarily the holes, which are a different size in the bottom and the sides of this thing. It's the holes that are in the top. You really need your grounds to be thicker than that or coarser than that, because what happens is, as the basket kind of fills with water and water starts seeping into the basket, it pushes those grounds out the top too. So you really have to be careful when it comes to that. And again, not overfilling the water that's in the percolator too. So those are just some tips. And that's probably the extent of, camp coffee on the go. I would also kind of throw in a AeroPress into there too. Now with an AeroPress, you would need to boil water first in something like a jet boil and then make your coffee in that. But that can actually be an upgrade to all of these. You probably get better coffee out of an AeroPress if you can kind of stand the added wait time of using an AeroPress, as well as kind of boiling water in something different that's not already your container. All right, guys, thanks for watching Gear Tasting. I have a couple of show notes that I want to wrap up with. The first off is that we talked a lot about Arc'teryx leaf products throughout the video. And one of the common things that we get feedback-wise from anytime we talk about Arc'teryx leaf stuff, or I'm writing a review on ITS about that kind of stuff, is that, oh my God, so expensive. So our friends at US Elite Gear are having a sale from today through Monday, I believe, from President's Day. So we do have an affiliate program with them. So full disclosure, we do have some links below that link to some Arc'teryx products. So if you want to follow them, you'll kick back a little bit to ITS if you purchase through those links. But it is probably a pretty good sale that's going on, and you can save some money off things like the jacket or the pack that we talked about today. And then also, if you're enjoying what we're doing here on Gear Tasting, we recently launched Gear Tasting Radio, which is our podcast that's based on content like this from Gear Tasting. Sometimes I can be a little long-winded, as many of you know, so we kind of created the podcast as a way to talk about the skills behind the gear that we talk about here, as well as kind of get more in-depth on some of these things too. So we have a lot going on with that show. We've just scratched the surface. We're now on episode 2. 3 is coming up next week on Tuesday, so they'll be released every Tuesday, but we're also doing an accompanying video that we filmed during the podcast filming that will be here on YouTube too, so you can check it out that way. So make sure, if you're digging what we're doing here, subscribe on iTunes, leave us a review, tell us what you think. That kind of helps build show momentum when you guys help us out and leave stuff like that, so we would very much appreciate it. As always, if you enjoy what we're doing here on Gear Tasting, consider joining the Crew Leader membership and allow us to give you back something in return. Details are below in the description. You can also pick up one of these awesome Gear Tasting mugs, which have the pound tag Gear Tasting, which you can use on any social media network to ask us questions like I read today on the show, and we'll get them answered here. Thanks again for watching.